how does God want to make us relate to people of other faiths?
The chief rabbi of this country, his name is Jonathan Sacks, talks about something called the dignity of difference. That is, that we embrace the differences that there are. It's a positive that there are so many differences, but that we have to respect the other. Now, in the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, there's a very famous command, love the neighbour as yourself, in Leviticus, that everybody knows. But on 36 other occasions, there's another command, which is love the stranger as yourself. So it seems to me that that is a really important command for me, and that's the way to relate to other people. And one other thing I'd say is the rabbis ask, who is a hero? And they answer, not somebody who's really strong, but somebody who turns a stranger into a friend. So I think that's what lies behind your question.
Can you give us any examples of good Jewish figures?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, the most famous person is, of course, Abraham. Because Abraham was one who showed lots of hospitality, and Abraham is somebody who shared between the 3 religions, known as Ibrahim in Arabic and Abraham for Jews and Christians. It's the same person. And Abraham is the model of hospitality and the model of trying to make friends.
Are there any passages that are quite bad to people of other faiths?
Oh, there are, unfortunately, in all our religions there are, including my own. Perhaps one of the most difficult is Psalm 137. Lots of people know the beginning of the psalm. By the rivers of Babylon, we lay down and wept when we remember Zion. And it's that story of the Israelites who are living in a foreign land and thinking of their homeland. But at the end of the psalm, there's a really angry part that most people forget or omit. And that says, "Blessed be he who smashes the children's heads against the rocks." It's a really difficult passage. And it's an angry passage. And I think it's really important that we Jews, and also Christians because it's in the book of Psalms, but we have to think about managing those difficult texts. And that's certainly one of the more difficult texts for me. The first thing is to acknowledge they exist. Sometimes we pretend they're not there. And then what we do is we leave those texts to the extremists to abuse and do terrible things in the name of religion. So the first thing is we have to accept that we all have difficult texts. And then the second thing is to reinterpret those texts. So let's take that Psalm 137. I understand that Psalm as somebody who's really angry because they've been dispossessed. Now, if you can explain it in that sort of context, then it helps deal with some of the anger.
Can you give us any examples from your own experiences?
Oh, it's very hard. I'll give you an example of a failure, because you can learn from failures. I once had an argument and I lost my cool. Ever happened to you? Yeah, I'm sure it has. And I was in a place called Hebron. You won't be visiting Hebron. It's a hothouse. And it's a place of real tension between the Israeli settlers and the local Palestinians. It's a very difficult place. And the only time I've ever really lost my cool in interreligious dialogue was with another Jew. Sometimes you think you shouldn't be arguing with people of your own faith. You argue more with people of your own faith sometimes than other faiths. And this person held a position about the West Bank, about the settlements, about the rights of Palestinians that was so diametrically opposed to my own. So I felt was such an abuse of what I considered to be beautiful about Judaism that I completely lost my cool. And I had an argument with him, and I lost that argument because I couldn't control myself. I was so angry. So there's an example of it's really important to be able to engage with people, even if you disagree with their views. You have to keep your cool. If you can, have a bit of humour. But, you know, if you can point out the nonsense of, say, the conspiracy theory, you know, what was the Nazi slogan? Die Juden sind unsere Unglück. The Jews are our misfortune. That was the Nazi slogan. So the Jews are the cause of 9/11, or the Jews are... It's obviously such nonsense. But you know what? If you can then turn it around and say, you know, and turn it into... The problems of the world are those Muslims, all them Muslims. You think, don't be ridiculous. Or the problems of the world are all caused by Arsenal supporters. I mean, I'm an Arsenal supporter. You know, everything is you know what I'm saying? That it's obviously so ridiculous. Now, to do that takes a bit of courage. And I'm also engaged in particularly Muslim-Jewish relations. You had Mikhail here, who's one of the teachers, as I am on that program, and you tackle difficult issues. And the first thing you do is build up a little bit of respect and a bit of trust, and then you have to be honest. There's no problem having different views. What should happen to Jerusalem? What should happen to Israel, Palestine, Jordan? You can have different views, but you have to be able to have the tools to be able to express that. And you need a little bit of patience, and you need a bit of humour. One of the tragedies in the Middle East, and you're going to see it in terms of the difficulties, that the Israelis, many Israelis, or at least the Jewish population of Israel, which is about 80%, feel surrounded by people that want to remove them, expel them. Likewise, Palestinians who have a very difficult time in Israel or the West Bank or in Jordan, where the majority of Jordanians are Palestinian, right, have a very difficult time. These are two peoples that have been suffering, but they can't see each other suffering. They can only see their own suffering. And that's one of the tragedies of it. There's a story I have to share with you that was told to me in the Arab market in Jerusalem about two brothers who were fighting over a field. It was the same piece of land, one field. And one had half and the other had half, but the one that had one half wanted the other half. So they brought in a very wise man, whether he's an imam, a rabbi, a priest, it doesn't matter, to try and resolve their debate or their dispute. And the wise man went to this field and he lay down, one ear to the ground. And the two brothers saying, what are you doing? And he said, shh. And he carried on staying there. And it looked like he fell asleep. So the brothers waited a few minutes and then they got really cross. They said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm listening to the land. And the land is telling me that you don't own it. It owns you. And it's also telling me that one day you'll be inside it. Now, it's easy for us, 3,000 miles away, to see the sort of power of that story. If you're in the heart of a conflict, it's much harder. One request I have for you three boys when you're in Israel, and you're standing at the Western Wall, and above you is the Golden Dome, and to your left is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and in front of you are those stones. So within just a few feet, you've got such key places in the Abrahamic faiths that you should say a little prayer there, a little prayer for the peace of Jerusalem and for the peace of the world. You do that, who knows, someone might be listening.